I studied economics in college when I was young, and I learned there about a man named Ibn Khaldun who lived 1,200 years ago in Egypt. And 1,200 years ago, he said, in the beginning of the empire, the rates were low, the tax rates were low, but the revenue was great. He said in the end of the empire, when the empire was collapsing, the rates were great and the revenue was low.
Let me just propose something that may seem crazy to you. You don't need to pay for tax cuts. They pay for themselves.
You need policies like an extension and making permanent the 01 and 03 tax cuts. They will be paid for because they create economic growth.
When President Bush imposed those tax cuts, they actually generated economic growth. They expanded the economy.
So what they do is they poll. They got very good pollsters. And you play off the general ignorance of the population. People don't know much.
Leading medical researchers are coming to the conclusion that marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug in the United States, and we haven't begun to find out all of the ill effects.
Reagan just made shit up.
But they are permanent ill effects. Permanent ill effects.
Tax cuts don't actually pay for themselves. If they aren't offset, they grow the deficit, just like spending does.
Tax relief not only has helped our economy, but has helped the federal budget. You cut taxes, and the tax revenues increase.
If that sounds too good to be true, that's because it is. It was debunked even at the time that George W. Bush was making that argument by his own economic advisors. A 2003 report to George W. Bush from his Council of Economic Advisors said, quote, although the economy grows in response to tax reductions, it is unlikely to grow so much that lost tax revenue is completely recovered. In other words, they're not paid for. In 2006, Bush's Treasury Secretary, Hank Paulson, said, quote, as a general rule, I don't believe that tax cuts pay for themselves. In 2007, Bush's former chief economist wrote to people still in the administration, quote, you are smart people. You know that the tax cuts have not fueled record revenues. The tax fairy is going to come in and make giant tax cuts not balloon the deficit. The argument that one way to cut the deficit is actually to cut taxes.
That makes no sense at all if you're talking about the needs of the middle class and working families.
I would like to propose that the issue is that on the campuses, you who are adults, you who are entrusted with those young people and their guidance, have a responsibility to make it plain to them from the very beginning that you yourselves do not tolerate the kind of conduct.
You've created an atmosphere on the campus where no one wants to listen.
You are a liar.
Listen to.
Now, don't you talk about political speeches. Don't you make a political speech of that kind.
I know over at Fox News right now they're already putting out a fatwa on me for committing the cardinal sin of taking in vain the sacred name of Ronald Reagan. Even though Reagan did a few things today's GOP would not like, he wrote the playbook for them on every issue of consequence. Sure, he raised taxes a few times, but when you look at where he started with taxes and where he ended, this is where our income inequality problems began. He invented voodoo economics. He invented the notion that black people get all the breaks, constantly telling the story of the Chicago woman, wink, wink, who has 80 names, 30 addresses, 12 Social Security cards, and her tax-free cash income is over $150,000. Actually, that woman never existed. Reagan just made shit up, something else he pioneered for his party of today. He described the New Deal as fascism, Medicaid recipients as waiting for handouts, unemployment insurance as prepaid vacation for freeloaders, and once said, a tree's a tree. How many more do you need to look at? He was the original official pitchman for batshit. When they hold up signs that say no socialized medicine, where do you think they got it from? We got it from you, Dad. We got it from you.
And if you don't do this, and if I don't do it, one of these days, you and I are going to spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Drama queen much? Worst of all, Reagan inspired a whole generation of people who hate government to get into government. Both sides really should stop pretending he was something other than the man most responsible for our decline. When you mainstream Reagan, the far right becomes the new middle.
Back to trickle-down economics, it didn't trickle.
I studied economics in college when I was young, 1,200 years ago in Egypt.